I would like to call the meeting to order. It happens to be November 13th, 2024 for Deschutes County Board of Commissioners. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I want to acknowledge that Commissioner DeBonne is on Zoom. Good morning, Commissioner DeBonne.
Good morning, everyone. I do apologize. I didn't see the 8:30 start time, and by the time I figured it out, it was not gonna, I wouldn't have been there. So remote today.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. All right, let's do our citizen input now. Carl Shoemaker. Good morning, Carl.
Good morning, I'm Carl, live in Bend. A modest proposal. Protestants fleeing prosecution, they wash upon these shores. Irish people fleeing famine, they washed upon these shores. Italians fleeing poverty, they washed upon these shores. Russians fleeing the Tsar and then the Soviets, they washed upon these shores. Jewish people after World War II, they washed upon these shores. But these Spanish speakers, they are too much. We can do without. We will put up a seawall. That will do the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shoemaker. Is there anyone else in the room that wanted to make public comments? I don't see anyone. Stephen, any raised hands on Zoom? None. Okay. All right, then. It does feel kind of like Friday the 13th, even though it is Wednesday. We did need to, I appreciate everyone for being here early today. I have a luncheon commitment that I think I made about 4 months ago. So have to drive to Redmond for noon lunch. So thank you for starting early. Let's now go to the consent agenda.
Move approval of the consent agenda.
And I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Mr. DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, let's now, we don't see Dr. Chesley. Let's actually go to item number 5 then, because I believe Scott is in the room. Scott, would you like to come up? We would love to acknowledge you. After 25 years, did you write a poem or anything?
25 years in prison is like a life sentence.
Usually,
Are
okay.
you ready for parole?
No.
I don't know, am I?
No, you're not.
Behaving well?
No, you have to stay in because
Okay.
yes, yes, we're very, yes, it's, when I saw those 2 numbers, I was very impressed. So no, thank you so much. It's almost like the same as opening the ski season this early ever. It was what, 26 years ago. So you're coordinating with that really well. So yes. I mean, do you remember when they opened the ski season in, what was it, 98 or something?
I was in Wallowa County then.
Oh, you were. So you had snow. Oh, the county with the shortest growing season in the state, and we're number 2. So
There you go.
yeah, I know. Yeah, it's the mountains that drew you.
So yeah,
Okay.
25 years it's gone. Actually, I got a little handout if you want.
Oh, we'd love it. I thought it would be a poem, but it's a handout. Okay.
Yeah, it's 25 years in numbers, because of course I'm a numbers guy. So
Of course. Yes. Okay.
So, yeah, no, over the last 25 years, of course, Deschutes County has seen a lot of changes, and I am extremely honored to serve the citizens over the last 25 years. Wow. They did show.
Oh, here they
Some
are.
of them, it's tax season though. Somebody has to watch the counter. So, but it's been a tremendous, tremendous honor to be able to serve the citizens. Oh, we got more. Should we wait a minute?
You are very popular today.
And also, it's been a privilege to work with these great group of people that, oh, let them come in.
Yeah. Feel the love, Scott.
Yeah. Now I'm embarrassed.
Mhm.
So, no, this is a great group of people. I'm so privileged to have them on staff. The last 25 years, and that graph you see there, you can see the change and the growth that we've had. And if it wasn't for the dedication and the hard work and the just and leveraging technology, looking for efficiencies, there's no way we could have pulled this off. Because as you can see, and I think it says a lot that in 25 years, we've added over 33,000 new properties. So envision every property in Redmond today times 2.5. That's how many new properties we put on with only 2.5 new people because of that innovation, because of that dedication. And so, like I say, I can't be more proud of this group of people that I work with.
Yes. When you look at those numbers, you realize what a job you and your team have done. Yes, plus 33,200 accounts. That's unbelievable. So, yeah, I thank you for moving from one mountain range to the next.
It's been quite a ride, and it's been a lot of fun, and I've had the privilege and honor of working with some very special people.
Scott, I just wanted to thank you for so diligently and faithfully applying a very complex set of state regulations and policies for assessment of property values to our growing community over these 25 years. And, when we think about where those assessed values, what those assessed values do for us, I mean, I think every single taxing district in Deschutes County needs to thank you and your team for delivering them the resources that they need to provide critical services all over our community. And the assessment is just such a critical component of that whole system of getting those resources to the people who are going to deliver the services. So thank you so much.
And I believe Nick Lilac would like to say a few kind words or read them from someone.
Sure, I would. Would you like to recognize Commissioner DeBone?
Oh, sorry, your hand is up. Sorry, Commissioner
I
DeBone.
didn't want to just jump in the room there, but yeah, I want to say a special thanks to Scott for his leadership. In the state of Oregon, we've been side by side at the Association of Oregon Counties and the Assessors Association recently. The statewide significance comes to mind the tax fairy video that was created explaining horizontal inequities of the Oregon state land use taxing system, and other counties followed that lead. Really that was shared around the state. And it's, you and your staff do a great job defining the system, understanding the system, and explaining to the residents what's going on sometimes. So thank you so much for what you're doing. 33,000 new properties is quite a load. Deschutes County, we're definitely a sophisticated, growing county. So thanks for what you've done, Scott, over these 25 years.
Thank you.
Oh, and I just had a text message from Dr. Chesley's assistant. Anyway, she was having confusion over address. So did she send it to you too, Brenda? Yeah. So is she still coming or not? Okay, we're going to reschedule that. Okay, now, Nick.
Okay, thank you. We received a very nice message from our former Chief Financial Officer, Greg Munn, via email. So I'll read this. I haven't just handed to me a few moments ago. So these are Greg's words. I met Scott while serving as the CFO for the High Desert ESD following the Great Recession of 2008. Like so many of us at the time, there were a lot of unknowns and a heightened concern regarding the financial impact of the collapse on schools and other publicly funded organizations that relied heavily on revenue from the Oregon tax system. Over the years following the Great Recession, Scott would meet regularly with public agency financial leaders to help us understand how the property tax system worked and what the financial impact of the recession could mean to each of our organizations. Scott's understanding of the complex tax system, his ability to explain it in a way that is understandable, and his willingness to meet with us at any time give him an A, in quotes there, in my book. He even created a video that explained the state's property tax system and the impact on the property taxes we pay, with the help of the property tax fairy, of course. That original video and versions of it continue to be used around the state today by local governments as a tool to explain the state's complicated property tax system. It has been one of my go-to tools for years, with an exclamation point. In addition to his knowledge, experience, and top-notch customer service attitude, Scott is well known and well regarded around the state as a leading expert in the field. I not only continue to rely on his expertise before, during, and after my time at Deschutes County, I consider Scott a friend and quality human being. The people of Deschutes County are fortunate to have Scott Langton as their assessor for the last 25 years. So thanks to Greg, and it really speaks on behalf of all of us for the services that you have provided and continue to provide. And as you have stated several times, and more of your staff members have come in, and you've credited your entire team for your work and your office's work. So thank you, Scott.
And it is Scott with one T, in case you're wondering, in case you're writing his name down. And one of our fabulous people that do serve and lead your division. Would it be okay if we took a picture with the entire team? Can you all come up to the front? And we could Photoshop in Commissioner DeBonne, don't you think, Eric? Yes.
Get one of those TV screens behind.
Hide as you can get.
Okay, we do have something for you. It's a letter.
A letter?
Yeah.
More plaques.
Yeah, I know, we're cutting them up today. Next, whoever's left, I'll get back.
If we can fill in over here.
Okay, Eric, and where are we putting Commissioner DeBonne?
I can see them.
Okay, all right. Yes.
All right, ready? 3, 2. And can we just get one with Scott and the commissioners?
No.
Thank you so much. Go down.
And if you guys could make Commissioner DeBonne like get it on that screen, we can orient that layer or something like that. We'll be behind.
There you go. There he is.
Got it. All right, ready? 3, 2. I got it. Thank you.
Nice. Amazing. Well, it's definitely Friday the 13th so far, isn't it? That's what I was thinking when I drive up to COCC. What building is it in? Okay, we're now to item number 6. I believe Dave Doyle.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dave Doyle, County Council. Yeah, so item number 6, you folks had asked if myself and the clerk could maybe provide some information on the 5 commissioner situation now that the voters have passed that. Steve has got an issue that he's dealing with, said he probably won't be here this morning, but I'll do my best to fill in all the information. So as you know, a few years ago, the commission shifted from partisan to nonpartisan. And then this last election, there was an initiative on the initiative measure on the the ballot to increase from 3 commissioners to 5. That measure operates such that the first election that you would have for those 2 new seats is in 26. That would be May of 26. Those seats would take office in January of 27 for a 2-year term, and then they'd be on a 4-year cycle thereafter. So that means in May of 26, there will be 4 commissioner seats on the ballot. There'll be the 2 new ones. There'll be Commissioner Dare's seat and Commissioner DeBone's seat. Those are obviously 4-year terms, but the 2 new ones, like I say, that first election will just be 2-year terms to get them on a cycle so that they'll be on a 4-year cycle in the sequence when Commissioner Chang's seat is up. So that's how that works. The question's been asked since then, well, could we do districts? Instead of having 5 at-large positions, could we do districts? And the answer is yes, you could. It would require another measure be put before the voters. You could refer that as the Board of Commissioners, or folks out in the community could do as they did before and gather signatures to get it on. It's a little more complicated than just increasing from 3 to 5, because you can guess when you're factoring in districts, how you draw those districts could have an impact on who gets elected. And so, and who feels that they're getting a certain level of representation. So that's an issue. Another issue, borrowing from other counties that have 5, and the others that have 5, with the exception of Clackamas, are home rule counties. But would be, are you going to do those 4 districts and 1 at large? Or are you going to have 5 districts? The 1 at large typically would be the chair seat, and that would be a 4-year term as the chair. And then the other 4 that are by district would be commissioners who would not be the chair. Those are options that you have as well. There's some timing issues to be aware of. The earliest you could get this on the ballot before the voters would be next November. The clerk advises against that, though, because that would cost a fortune, and it could just as easily be on in May or November of 26 and cost a lot less money to the taxpayers to put it on. So that's, Steve wanted me to put that plug in, that if that's something that the commissioners are looking to do, or I suppose folks out in the community, if they were to try and get signatures, that would go in 26 would be a lot cheaper, because there's a primary and a general in 26 anyway. So he wanted that to be known. So yeah, 5 districts, you could certainly do that. 4 districts and 1 at large, you could do that. Those districts would have to be identified and be part of the measure that goes before the voters. I've been playing with some numbers. I'm not sure how you could do, let's say, 4 districts and an at-large without having the 3 non-Bend districts reach into Bend to grab some population. So how that all looks and gets configured, that would be the devil in the detail to figure out. There's not a lot of guidance on how that would occur. There is provisions, I believe it was Clatsop County. Clatsop County, as part of their home rule charter, which again, a charter is different than a general law county. A charter requires a charter committee and typically addresses more than just, are you going to have 5 commissioners or 3, or are they going to be in districts or not? Typically it involves other matters of county government, including some elected positions that become appointed positions. And there's some latitude there. But it's a much more drawn out process. A charter likewise can only be put before the voters, a home rule charter proposal, in even numbered years. So they have to be at a May or a November primary or general election. So that's not something that's possible until 2026. And then another issue that you would potentially want to consider is if you're going to make some or all of the positions part-time. Washington County, for instance, the 4 commissioners elected by district are part-time. The 1 chair that's elected at large county-wide is a full-time position. So that's another thing that you'd have to kind of figure out. So all those are issues that you would want to address. Probably the biggest issue is if it's something the board's inclined to look to have happen, would be a process that you would want to employ for how to draw those districts. The commissioners could do it unilaterally. They could also appoint some sort of a blue ribbon committee to help figure that out and to come up with potential options for how that would look. And you know, how you seed that committee, again, you have discretion in that, but if you're drawing from the charter process, the charter process calls out, you know, our state representative gets to pick somebody, our state senator gets to pick somebody. I think the D party gets to pick someone, the R party gets to pick someone. The idea is to come up with something that everybody can somewhat agree is mostly fair. I mean, we're all aware of redistricting issues throughout the country at various times. There's generally going to be some objection and unlikely that you're going to get 100% buy off that this is a fair drawing of the lines, but hopefully you get something in the ballpark of 90% of the people maybe agreeing. So
90?
maybe
Okay.
60,
Okay.
60, but yeah.
Let's be optimistic. It is the 13th.
There's certainly going to be some of those issues, and especially a county like this where, so, you know, half the population's in Bend and the rest is all scattered throughout the rest of the county, a couple cities and whatnot. So, and you have plenty of time. So that would be kind of my takeaway is there's no urgency in as much as you could put it on, like I said, in November of 25, but you're going to pay a lot of extra money to run that election and it's not going to do anything. The earliest any folks elected by district could take office would be January of 2029. They would be elected in the 28 election.
Yeah.
And that's because the 26 election starts next September. That's when folks can file that they want to be candidates for it. And so you couldn't have them start filing in September and then change the mode by an election 2 months later in November. So the earliest election you could impact with districts as a method for selecting the 5 would be the 2028 election to take office in January of 2029. And then 2 years later, you'd have that occur again in 2030 to take seat in January of 2031. And by my math, positions 2, 4, and 5 would be part of the 2028 election, and positions 1 and 3 would be part of the 2030 election. So again, the takeaway, there's quite a bit of time to give this some thought to, you know, before moving forward very quickly with anything. It's an absolute that the 2026 election will be at large, that the 4 commissioners elected at that time will all be at large. None of them will be designated the chair. That'll be up to a vote of the county commissioners as it has historically been. So that's kind of it. I can try to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, that's the 10,000-foot overview of what this would all entail.
Okay, it would be interesting to know exactly who would appoint that blue ribbon committee. Is that in state statute somewhere?
No, there's not. So presumably it would be the county commissioners that would ultimately appoint the folks that would assist you in drawing these boundaries. Again, you could arbitrarily do it yourselves. The 3 of you could say, well, we're going to draw them. There's nothing that would necessarily preclude that. But if we borrow from some of the processes with county charter processes and other counties that have had county charters, that's how there's a designated types of folks that get to be part of that. And again, if you're looking for, you know, I think some transparency and for it to look fair, I think the most fair looking process would be to have folks, you know, from various sides of the various fences, if you will, involved in it. You know, again, you folks are nonpartisan, but people know what your persuasions are in terms of R's or D's, or liberal or conservative. So if 3 of you are deciding what those boundaries are going to be, I think there's a pretty good chance there might not be uniformity on that. And it just becomes more of a political thing. Whereas I think by having a blue ribbon committee of folks that are assisting you with that, you're going to get a little more objectivity and probably be a little easier to get the folks that are voting on it to feel that it was put together in a more fair, maybe less partisan process. And that's why typically you'd have someone the DR party appoints and the D party appoints and you know, so anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
Okay, Commissioner DeBonne, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, hello, everyone. Again, so yeah, just taking a step back, there was a petition process to put two more commissioners on the commission, and it's passed. So really, remember, that's the starting point. That's done. It's going to be certified at some point. So looks like that passed. So I want to thank Dave for just laying out what if. And at this point, we'll acknowledge that two more commissioners are going to be on the ballot a couple years from now. And is there a way to optimize that, or a community discussion around, is there other action here? So I'm just letting I'm wide open to figuring out, is there another action? As I say, one of the thoughts, and I've heard this a few times, which leads me to the conclusion that some folks might have voted for this thinking they're voting for their commissioner, which assumes a district, which this is not. So this is just for the community to digest for me today. Let's get some feedback. Let's get some engagement. Who's interested? We've already got some emails explaining the will of the voters and the opinions. But is there a way to have a discussion about possible districts? So I'm just showing support for moving this forward. No decisions today. Thank you.
Mr. Chang, did you have any comments?
I guess I would just say the overwhelming margin by which Measure 9-173 passed is an indication to these three commissioners that the community thinks that a expanded Board of Commissioners will make better decisions. With that in mind, with that principle in mind, I would suggest that if these commissioners aren't even going to be seated till 2030, we should just postpone discussion of districting until the two new commissioners are seated in early 2027. Because the voters have said that they think that a 5-member commission is going to make better decisions than this body. I guess I would also just say, I support the idea of districting. I think it is a good idea in the long run to ensure representation from every corner of Deschutes County. At the moment, we are lucky, it's just a lucky circumstance that we have a commissioner from South County, a commissioner from the center of the county, and a commissioner from North County. But there's no guarantee of that with at-large seats in the future.
And I do think districting is good. And honestly, putting it on the ballot next November, if that's going to be so excessively expensive, I think that wouldn't be a good idea. But I would think having it worked out by the spring would be really appropriate. So the spring of 26, if we can put it on the ballot then where it's not going to cost, and have something that really is transparent and fair to our community.
That if you were targeting May of 26, and yeah, your earlier target date would be the very tail end of February to have everything figured out on your end to push it to the ballot.
Okay,
So-
so we're saying February of 26, we'd have everything figured out.
Your drop dead date that we'd have to get all the material to the clerk, and he'd have to put it in the paper and do the whole process to get it on the ballot. So yeah, you're looking at February of 26, and what are we're November of 24, so that's about 18 months or 17 months, something like that.
Okay.
So, and
Great.
in the interim, certainly staff's available if you want to work with us or communicate with us on ideas you have as to how to do some of that legwork behind the scenes. We can certainly, to the extent that we're allowed, obviously we can't get engaged in political things, but we can certainly get involved in structural things like how the election's going to occur, if that's the will of the commissioners to work on that. We can come up with some options if you did want to appoint some sort of a committee to help with the districting piece. And then, like I say, the other issues, full-time, part-time, whether the chair's at large, how many districts, is it going to be 4? Is it going to be 5? Those are things that I think the commissioners would probably want to give some guidance on initially, and then, your committee could kind of work from there. Or I suppose you have the option of letting the committee, if you do put a committee together, address those as well. But I think the committees probably has a better fit for the districting piece. You folks are going to know better, I would think, about the full-time, part-time. you know, whether you think an at-large chair is a good model, or whether you prefer having the chair just selected from amongst you once a year.
Stephen, we're actually at the, Dave is at the table now for this issue. He just brought up that it would cost a lot to have to put this on the election next November, which would be the earliest. And so he's recommended per your comments that wouldn't be financially, fiscally appropriate. So we could do it then in the May election of 26.
Yes, good morning, Steve Dennison, County Clerk. But yes, correct. To have, as of right now, there is nothing scheduled for November of 25. So it would be a standalone election unless another jurisdiction chose to consolidate or call an election. So if the county chose to, the board chose to put this forward in November, it would be, and the cost will be entirely on the county. But holding the election the following year, you're still under the same time constraints as far as if the voters choose to pass this and moving forward. But if you had it in May or November, there would be enough time before that next cycle to have this in place, if that makes sense.
What is the current number of signatures for a petition if there's a community effort started, like the effort that just added 2 commissioners?
I don't have that number handy.
Is it like 6,000 or 12,000?
Uh, In the ballpark of 7,000, but I would have to double.
That's what I thought. Yep. 6 or 7,000. Good. Thank you.
And there's no there's no need to explore that kind of a process if there's support from a majority of the Board of Commissioners with moving forward with districts. You know, that is something that we could have done at any point along the way in the last 2 years is referred or measured directly to the voters from the Board of Commissioners for districts. But we didn't. And, you know, there was a lot of time spent just opposing, even asking the voters the question whether they wanted 2 additional commissioners or not.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm
and I
going to
remember the ad saying that this isn't going to cost you anymore. And as far as I know, Deschutes County does not print its own money, and there will be a cost involved. But apparently, yes, the voters have voted, so that's fine. But there always is a cost.
No, that was a response to the lies that were being put out that this would raise taxes, which it cannot do because our general fund assessed property tax rate is already at its maximum.
Okay, well, thank you, Dave. It sounds like we will keep this issue. We won't put it till the end, and we'll start working on it tomorrow.
And Chair, if I can just state, you know, at the staff level, we're not going to be seeking board direction until you're ready to provide it. But it will be helpful for us to have some sense of how long would it take to assemble the committee, for how many meetings might be required. Is this a 6-month process, a 9-month? I don't know. Do we need to hire a facilitator to facilitate the committee? So it's just, if this were to be the desire of the board for it to be on the May 26th ballot, and I haven't heard universal or perhaps any support, that's fine. It's just at the staff level, we just need to know what the time frame is, or if it's 27 or 28, whatever it is. It's just helpful for us to have for us to work together to understand how many months this might take, even what the process might cost for hiring a facilitator, et cetera, to get to that point of creating a recommendation for the ballot measure, something of that nature.
I support May of 26, that ballot. And Dave was just saying, I think that's 18 months from now, with everything would be 100% signed on by February of 26.
Yes, certainly if you're going to refer something, everything would have to be in place. Might even be early March, but Steve knows those dates better. But to get it to him, for him to do his stuff and publish and all of that, so you can get on the ballot in May. So yeah, I would target the middle to tail end of February as your point in time when everything would have to be ready to move over to the clerk's office for his process. And so in that interim between then and now, that delta would be when you'd potentially need to determine, one, are you going to go forward with this? And if you are, are you going to do it yourselves? Are you going to appoint some sort of a committee to help draw these district lines, these proposed district lines? And who's going to make the decision? Are you going to put it up to the voters? Are you going to keep it as it is, where at this point it's 5 full-time positions? If you're going to change that, then that's something also the voters are going to have to be involved with.
They would have to be involved in that decision too.
Yeah.
And would those be 2 separate ballot measures? Because, those are 2 discrete things, districts and full-time to part-time.
Our assumption is, yes, it would be, but I'm not positive on that just yet.
Okay.
I know there's the single subject issue, whether this is kind of all part of that or not is a separate issue. What's the subject? Is it is it districts, or is it county commissioners, and how they're selected and in that process? So there's a little bit of analysis that we need to go on there. Ideally, it would probably be in a single measure, just for simplicity's sake.
And that's one of the benefits of the home rule charter is you can do a whole batch of things.
You can do a whole batch of things with your initial charter, yeah. And if you choose to go that rate, that way, yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll also just chip in here that Mayor Fitch from Redmond recalled for, I believe, all of us that there was a home rule charter effort in 2026, and they proposed 2006. And they proposed a 4-district, 1-chair at-large structure with a map. And I haven't gone back, I haven't had a chance to go back and look at that map yet, but from the way that he described it, that Ed described it, I mean, it sounds like it might be a reasonable starting point for discussion. So if we don't want to go to forming a full-blown committee to process this for us, I mean, we could take a look at that as a starting proposal and tinker with it a little bit. I mean, population has changed a lot since 2006, but it's quite possible that that map is close to what we would need.
We could certainly look into that, yeah.
Yes.
We'll locate it.
Yes, that would be a good idea. Definitely. I mean, Redmond is now 38,000. So there's a lot of changes, and Sisters feels like 15,000, though it's only 3,800. And then look at the growth in La Pine. So the county has had a lot of growth since 2006. So are we clear enough today to proceed then? Do we need a vote on if we want to shoot for the May of 26? Should we have a vote now on that, or can we come back later?
I would suggest perhaps I'll work with Nick and his team and Steve and get at least a little better understanding of what we'd be looking at, maybe bring that back with a little more clarity for the board. I think a motion would probably be a better fit at that time, because I'm not sure exactly
Right.
the motion would be right now. It's still sort of amorphous and trying to get some clarity. And as Commissioner DeBone noted, the results from last week haven't even been certified yet. So
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Steve, for coming downstairs. Thank you for all that you've done. And thank you, Mr. Doyle. Okay, we're now at item number 7.
Morning, Commissioners. Robert Tintel, Chief Financial Officer.
Cam Sparks, Budget Manager. Forrest Gundrick, Budget Analyst.
This morning, we're coming to you as a continuation of the ARPA conversation that we had last Monday. And although there is an additional item that we added to this in an updated number, and we'll point those out as we go along. This morning, for the board's consideration, are 3 recommended motions, and you'll find those in your packet on page 8. I just want to summarize those briefly for you. The first motion is for the board's consideration to move approval of the reallocation of $1.8 million in returned ARPA funds and move it to the replacement category. So this is really just the concept of moving out of very specific ARPA category and moving it to revenue replacement so that we can use those funds more on a timeline outside of the ARPA, but we'll still use them for ARPA eligible projects. The second motion is to reallocate about $1 million, $1.64 million. And this is for current approved board ARPA projects that we're going to be continuing, but we'd also like to move those funds into the revenue replacement category. And so both of those items, it's just taking the funds that we already have and moving them out of ARPA specific categories, other categories, and moving it to the specific revenue replacement category, so that we have more of the flexibility with that. The third item, that's the item where the meat of the agenda is, of the $1.883 million that's referenced in motion above, how would the board like to allocate those resources? And that's detailed with options in item number 3 for the board's consideration today. So the first two are more around allowing us to use the revenue replacement category. And then the third motion is how should we allocate that first funding level that we're carrying over.
Okay, and Robert, you also said you have something new that you're going to bring up, but I was actually at the Facilities Review Committee meeting the other day, and they brought up the fact that the delay in the courthouse has cost 1.2 million, and I wondered if you are addressing that issue at all here. I mean, it sounded like it's coming from a few different sources, that 1.2 million, but it's a significant number that I think we all need to be aware of.
Yes, Lee and I have talked about that as well. And that actually is separate from ARPA funding, but there is a plan for that. And Lee will be coming back with that as well. But that is separate from the ARPA at this point.
Yes, but it's a big number.
Yes, absolutely.
And didn't we get like, oh, what was it? $4 million plus, and on top of the ARPA, the top of the 38.4 million, we received another group of funding through ARPA that we were able to use for the courthouse. I know.
Yes, the Local Assistance Tribal Consistency Fund.
Yes.
And that is still budgeted and targeted to be applied to the courthouse as well.
Okay.
Already through board decisions on that.
Okay.
The one item that was updated was a health services number. And if you want to speak to that, Laura.
Sure, yes. As you can see in that first graph, the available funds, the health services contact tracing, they are returning the $24,304. And last week that number was incorrectly reported. There was just a project string error in how that was tracked in our system. And so we've since corrected that. So that number is now 24,000. So the total available funds is the 1.883608 that we're talking about today. And as you can see, the proposed projects total $2,367,000. So that's kind of what Robert mentioned is what we'd like to discuss here today, how the board would like to distribute those remaining funds.
And just as a last reminder before asking for your discussion as well, is the Managed Homeless Camp. It was of the $1.8 million listed on this, it was $1.5 million was previously dedicated by the board towards those projects. 300,000 is remaining undecided as far as specific where that should go. That's the makeup of the $1.8 million. And with that, we open it up for additional comments or discussion on proposed projects.
Well, Commissioner DeBonne, I'm sorry. Well, it's good. You're on Zoom. So please step in whenever you have any comments. I did reread the Terrebonne number, and they said at a minimum that they could use 35,000 for that sanitary district, and they would find a way to cover the 40,000. I don't know. You know, I was just trying to be really frugal with what we're doing here.
And during our discussions with them last week, we also discussed the idea that they might just borrow those funds from us because they are on the cusp of receiving a massive amount of capital investment through federal and state sources for their wastewater system. They're essentially in a cash flow kind of window of time right now. So kind of cash flowing them the money, a little bit of a short-term loan, bridge funding, whatever you want to call it, could potentially serve that purpose. And Chris also, when Chris from our road department director, also said that there was opportunities to cover these requests, these wastewater infrastructure requests through PILT funding over at the road department as well. So I want to support those projects moving forward, and I don't think that we need to do it out of the American Rescue Plan funds.
And I happen to know that our road director I believe he's elk hunting today. So hopefully he's gotten an elk. Mr. DeBonne, would you be comfortable with that if we could put those over to PILT funding?
Yes, pulling them out of the ARPA and having a discussion about, what's a support level. Remember, I think, is this Tumalo item? Is that one of them? Is the projector? I
Yes,
think.
Pomelo is for 25,000 and the Terrebonne Sanitary is for 75,000.
Well, yeah, as I say, not a big part of it, but part of it is a projector and a screen. So as I say, we might have something like that in our inventory that we're rotating out because we have so many, upgrade that's we've done over time.
Right.
Okay. Well, so as I look at the recommended motions, the first one and the second one are pretty straightforward. A little bit of discussion about the third one is what we're going to right now. And if you agree, maybe we can do those first two and then kind of figure out that third little table of how the allocations are going to happen.
Okay. I think that makes sense. Thank you so much.
I'll move approval to reallocate $1,883,608 in returned American Rescue Plan Act funds to ARPA revenue replacement category and reserve in the general fund.
And I'll second it.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Oh, I do want to comment that the good news was today on the radio that our DA is now down to 80 public defenders that are missing. We're down to 80, and I believe there was another county that had like 800 cases. So our numbers are going the right way. So that's good because I see we have some DA violence prevention funding in here. So calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang.
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So then we have item number 2.
So for the next item, I'll make that motion. So move approval to reallocate $1,064,626 in internal project funds remaining after 12/31/24 to roll over to the ARPA revenue replacement category. These projects are ARPA administration, health services, homeless outreach services, health services, COVID unit team, and health services, public health response and recovery.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion on that motion?
So for discussion, homeless outreach services, I know we're doing good work out there, and this is just a statement that, I just think we can do a little bit more deterministic efforts in the big picture of homeless. And when I've talked to some folks recently, they're looking for leadership, and as I say, I'm not trying to judge or push too much here, but coordinating on our homeless response just a little bit more about who's leading, who's following is going to be important. So we're funding our health services to do this wonderful outreach, and it's sometimes not coordinated with the big picture.
Yes, thank you for those comments. I actually was checking with Bend Fire, and clearly our arrangement with Bend over moving, the Dirt World location. That project has got to make some, by the end of May, that has to have some serious progress. And there are people in the room that are working on that currently. And then the fact that Redmond and the county are working together too on a similar timeline. So I feel like we're clearly making progress. What I was going to say is there were 79 fires started by transients per Bend Fires documentation this year alone. So we are definitely, it's incredibly challenging, and I would say May of 26, it's May of 25, it's got to be, we've got to be in a way better spot than we are today.
I'll just add that I believe Cheryl and Emily are online, available for questions if there are any specific questions for health.
Right. Yes. What is that 529,000 going to actually do?
529,000.
It's $500,000.
Oh, they are available for questions.
Okay.
If Cheryl, if you'd like to.
Cheryl, can you identify what $500,000 is going to be paying for? Is that an allocation, Laura, through 26 then? Is that a 2-year allocation?
So.
There she is. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning, Commissioner Cheryl Smallman, Business Officer for Health Services. That 529,662 is the previously approved amount to support the 3 full-time equivalent staff on the homeless outreach services team through June of 26.
So it's not through the end of the year then, it's just through June 30th, 26.
Yeah, and these are these are positions we decided to support within the homeless outreach team, services team, in response to glowing feedback from the City of Sisters and other jurisdictions about the impact that these outreach workers were making, specifically with homeless people who have behavioral health challenges. A, this was something we decided a long time ago. B, this was a decision that was made with quite a lot of feedback and supportive input from many community partners. And C, we're not talking about adding money. We're just talking about recategorizing how we are expending these funds that we committed to a long time ago.
Okay, well, I do think it's important today to clarify that this is not through year end. It's only through June 30th of 26. So I think we need to be reminded of that. Anything else you wanted to add, Cheryl?
Yeah, one clarification is that when we look out through June 30th of 26, that 529,000 that was previously approved, there's a shortfall to support those 3 staff through that date. That's the additional 45,000 that we are actually requesting so that we can support all 3 positions through that date. When we look at reasons why, increased health benefit costs, COLAs, et cetera, from our original proposal date.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, any other questions? I believe the motion was made by Commissioner DeBonne. Are we ready for the vote? Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So now we're to item 3, the details.
Yeah, so if you'd like, we could go through each project.
Sure.
So as Robert had mentioned, the $1.8 million, the homeless managed camp kind of
Could you speak a little louder, maybe into
sorry.
the microphone because people in the room can't
split.
hear you?
Thank you. Was split into that 1.5 for that RFP process with the Coordinated Houseless Response Office. And then we held the 300,000 as kind of a placeholder in addition to that. So that makes up that 1.8. Obviously, if every other project was funded today, that amount would be reduced. So if you'd like, we can move on to the next one, ARPA administration.
Yes.
Okay. So funds were allocated to ARPA administration support to support ongoing staff time for the management of the grant. Due to several factors, including large increases in health plan costs, as Cheryl mentioned, and PERS rates, we are requesting an additional $111,000 to partially cover that existing 1.0 regular duration FTE position, responsible for both ARPA management and countywide budget functions.
Okay, and that is through 12/31 of 26.
Correct.
All right.
We discussed the 2 sanitary district requests.
Could we
already.
maybe vote on these individually?
Of course.
Would that be okay?
I mean, since there's 2.36
$2.3
million of requests and we only have 1.88 million, I don't think we can vote on them individually. I mean, I think we have to kind of decide on a package that fits within 1.88 million.
Right. So the first question remains, are we going to leave the 1.8 million for the homeless managed camp programs?
If you want, I can kind of, taking a step back, if we looked at funding everything else, we would.
So we've moved the 100,000 from the sanitary to the
from the
PILT.
sanitary district.
Those two to the PILT.
Mhm.
Okay.
So if we funded ARPA administration, the health services request for $45,000 and Shepherd's House request for $225,000, that would leave us with $1.5 million that could go towards managed camp. If that was the way we wanted to work it, just so you have that number, would be 1,502,608.
What was that number again? 1 million?
1,502,608.
Okay, I don't know if the Shepherd House request was something that I was made aware of. They are trying to do a project for homeless women, and we're finding that a lot of people now that are homeless are women, and it's really good that they're targeting that population. Currently, I believe they can only serve 9 women and children in Bend, and so they have a project that they are working on. And I know that City of Bend also, I was made aware last week that they were allocating an additional $3 million, I believe, in ARPA funding that they had were working with. There was a meeting after our churro meeting. I'm not sure exactly if they made any decisions at that meeting, but hopefully Shepherd's House is going to be able to get some more help for the entire project, because there were quite a few houses that they wanted to buy for this program.
So Commissioner, are you supportive of that money?
Honestly, I am. Their house on Division Street runs a great program. The women's program is excellent. And because when I was actually out in the homeless camps, I guess it was 2 months ago, I just saw woman after woman after woman. And I feel it was really, it's frightening. They're vulnerable. And, if we could help with this program, I think it would really be, it would be a good message for the community.
Well, I can get there too.
If we
knowing
were
that
left
this-
with 1.5 million for our other projects, I think we're going to have to make it work.
And as a
And we
SAC,
have asked for money through the state. They did ask for what do we need for the next 2 years, and tried to put in funding in a state request.
Great. Well, and I can show support for Shepherd's House, knowing that the project defined, ready to move, right? So that's the value for me at this point in time.
Yes, they're ready to buy it if we could do this.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Shepherd's House. I think that this is a great project. And I also am really concerned that, at the strategic level, we have this huge hole, this gap in the continuum of shelter and transitional housing in the region, which is an authorized camp. We do have transitional housing. We do have congregate shelter. We do have non-congregate shelter. We do have tiny house villages. We do have safe parking. There are places for women in, I've seen, there's the Central Oregon Villages set up on the east side of Bend is, primarily a women-focused space.
But there's not, there's honestly, there's not enough. I'm really happy that they really, they've had their fabulous men's program on Division for a long time. It's very successful, but I'm really happy that they have realized the need in our community.
And yeah, no, and again, I'm saying, I think this is a great project. I think this is a great organization. And I am really concerned that, that we need to have adequate investment to fill this strategic gap in the continuum of shelter and transitional housing that we have in the community. So I'd really like to support the Shepherd's House project as well. I could support a smaller investment. Just trying to, again, preserve as big a block as possible to actually make one or two or a few of these managed camp investments actually work, because they will take a lot of money, and with this setup, with this, moving these funds to revenue replacement, we are not time limited on when we can spend those funds. So, I mean, to me, a nightmare scenario would be investing a substantial amount of money to set up a managed camp, and then not having any money to operate it in 9 months. And that would be a disaster.
Well, the really good news, if you will recall, the city of Bend said they would do 50-50 with us on what we're talking about with the agreement with them. And Redmond is actually, I believe, this week should have a number that they are going to be able to contribute to our joint operation in Redmond on county land. So, you know what? We need to do something now. We've got women, winter is coming, and I don't want to shortchange them. I want them to be able to do this. And, the community generosity for this project, there's other houses that they can buy, and perhaps more people in the community can help and step up and really make this successful. But winter is coming. Winter is 7 times more dangerous for homeless people. And I saw too many women out there, and I really feel like this is something we could do now. So.
As is adding safe parking, as is adding more tiny house village.
Yes,
spaces.
and the good
So
news is Rick Russell is now going to be moving to Bend with his amazing program. Thank goodness. He will be here expanding safe parking in Redmond and Bend. So, some excellent things are happening. Some more churches, I believe, have said they will participate in Bend. So I just, I think we should do this now. So is there a motion? Because we'll still have $1,502,608 left, correct, Laura?
Correct, yes.
Yes.
So yeah, I'll move to remove Terrebonne Sanitary, Tumalo Sanitary, and approve all other items in this fund.
Okay. So I'll make the second. Is there any further discussion?
Is Cheryl still with us?
Cheryl, are you still with us?
I would like to ask whether behavioral health has other sources of funding to cover this 45,000 this 45,000 gap to make those hosting positions whole if we didn't allocate the 45 out of this source.
Yeah, we do have health services reserve funds that could be utilized towards that. Obviously, it'd be in with a discussion around priorities and where we do support, what teams do. We do use that funding to support, so this one would just go in discussion.
So do you want to amend your original motion then, Commissioner DeBonne? To eliminate the 45,000, so that would put us up at $1,547,608.
So yeah, knowing that's about a year and a half away, I would support that at this time. So that would remove the 45.
Okay. And,
I'll second that.
okay, so Commissioner Chang will second that. All right, any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So, all right, Laura, so now we will agree on $1,547,608 are left for us to carefully allocate to homeless projects.
Yes. Thank you, commissioners.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. This will help with administration as well.
Okay, and I wanted, when will the courthouse 1.2 million be coming up then for us? Do we have it on the schedule? It was a 6.25 delay. Oh, here's Whitney. Just wondering, Whitney, when we're going to be talking about it.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Whitney Hale, Deputy County Administrator. Facilities Director Lee Randall is working closely with the courthouse construction team to review all of the actuals and kind of bring the board the best information we have. We anticipate he'll be before the board in the next few weeks.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, now we have, oh, the Wolf Fund. Yes, we just had cougar kills in my neighborhood. They got into my neighbor's goats. So it's always dynamic times when you're in the country.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. Sorry, Strategic Initiatives Manager for the record. Sorry to hear that, Commissioner.
Well, yes.
The good news from the Wolf Committee is there were no further depredations into Deschutes County this year.
We had our last meeting just a few weeks ago in October, and the wolf biologist was there and confirmed some of the preventative measures that have been instituted seem to be working for the property that was affected in the previous year. Just as kind of a backstory here, earlier this year, and I think it was in March, the Oregon Department of Agriculture granted Deschutes County $32,620.75 for fiscal year 24 and 25 to be used for wolf depredation and missing compensation and preventative measures to reduce conflict between wolves and livestock. The committee has been meeting on a regular basis, at least quarterly, if not more often. And in April, once those designations, are you guys getting feedback from that microphone? Once we receive those designations or the grant dollars from ODA, the committee designated a total of $24,620.75 of those funds, brought those before the board in April, and the board approved the designation, the recommended designation from the committee unanimously. That left $8,000 in remaining grant funds that is either required to be expended by January 31st of 2025 or returned to Oregon Department of Agriculture. At the time, the committee's recommendation in April was to hold those funds to see if there was any other further needs or grant applications, which we had opened up and did some outreach to local producer and livestock owners We have not received any further grant fund requests at this time. And on October 8th, 2024, following some discussions from, again, the wolf biologist, and we had U.S. Fish and Wildlife there as well as somebody from OSU Extensions Livestock to provide expert recommendations or educated recommendations on the expenditure of those funds. The committee came up with the following recommendations for board consideration. One, to grant $2,500 to purchase Fox lights, which is a preventative measure that the wolf biologists and U.S. Fish and Wildlife say is the most effective for the territory and landscape that Deschutes County has for livestock owners. Grant $2,000 to Wildlife Services to support carcass removals from properties in or around known wolf activities areas within Deschutes County, which provided the testimony that we received from the wolf biologist. This could be the #1 deterrent in preventative measures for wolf conflict on livestock land. And third, to grant $3,500 to Long Hollow Ranch, which was the ranch that received funds in the past, who had a depredation and missing livestock claims, and as well has implemented a robust preventative measure campaign on his property, which oversees 3 different counties, or his entire range crosses 3 different counties there, but predominantly, or a large part of that is in Deschutes County. So those are the recommendations before the board. I will pause, allow any discussion, or happy to answer any further questions.
Okay. Well, Commissioner DeBonne, do you have any questions? No.
Well, I don't know how bright the Fox lights are. I think they're just kind of response and flash or turn on or whatever they do, but it's funny, kind of a conflict to our dark skies efforts. But as I say, they may not be very impactful, but just acknowledging that. Other than that, I'm supportive of these recommendations.
So what if we do have a kill in the next 2 months?
So the way the program is set up with ODA is that depredation is a reimbursement. So if there is a depredation before the grant, we haven't received the new grant funding opportunity, but my guess is it's going to be the similar timeline. So if there is a depredation before January 30th of 2025, then that can be applied to the following year's grant cycle. If it happens after that, then the depredation and or missing claim would go for the following grant year. So preventative measures are in current year, and depredation and missing livestock claims are for previous years.
Okay.
So yeah, when the committee meets early in 2025, we would be able to forward a claim essentially to the state at that time, if there was a depredation in the next couple months.
And just for clarification, the depredation does have to be confirmed by the wolf biologist. So there's a process in place. The missing livestock claims doesn't necessarily have to be a confirmed certified wolf depredation.
Okay. Is there a motion then?
I'll move to approve the distribution of remaining wolf depredation and financial compensation committee grant funds as proposed by the Wolf Committee.
And I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner?
I guess just the one other thing I would say about these, at least items 1 and 2 of on this list is this is sort of the committee still had some prevention funds left towards the end of the year, and they just tried to figure out what strategically would set us up best to support prevention efforts in the years to come, with those funds that otherwise we would need to send back to Salem, which, sending $8,000 back to Salem is probably costs more to process all that than it actually is worth. I was really pleased, working with the Wolf Committee, that they were thinking forward and basically kind of playing mental chess with, what might happen in the future, where are the potential threats, what can we best do to to guard against those and prevent additional depredations. So I just wanted to express support for this package that came out of the committee.
Okay, calling for the vote. Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Okay, it looks like Tanya is here and I see Will in the room. We have item number 9.
Scared of that microphone, so I'm going to sit here.
Is it scary?
A little feedback.
That was quite a lot of feedback.
Is this okay?
Is the middle one better?
You get it a
No?
little closer.
Middle one's loud.
Okay.
It's
What about the one over on the, because people can't hear
Oh, is this one on?
online.
It's just, you just didn't get it very close to you yet. Can you get it a little closer?
This better?
Yeah.
Just
Sorry,
don't
Stephen,
breathe.
Could you? I'll try my best. Sorry, Stephen, could you try that? Thank you. Good morning. For the record, Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner. I'm here for continued deliberations concerning RVs as rental dwellings. I'm going to share my screen, so just bear with me for one moment, please. I also forgot my glasses, so if I squint and look funny, that's why. Okay. As I said, this is the continued deliberations for RVs as rental dwellings text amendments. As a reminder, the project website, and which contains the full record, is found at www.deschutes.org/RV amendments. A couple important milestones. The 35-day notice with the Department of Land Conservation and Development was October 4th, 2023. The first evidentiary hearing with the Planning Commission was held on November 9th of the same year, and I will review that a little bit in a second. And the first Board of County Commissioners hearing was held on May 8th. Just a very brief overview of the process, because it has been a little time since the Planning Commission process. The Planning Commission held their public hearing, excuse me, on November 9th and continued that to December 14th. The written record for that hearing closed on December 28th. At that time, after deliberations, the Planning Commission voted 4-3 not to adopt those amendments. They also, however, provided a list of recommendations if in the case that the Board of County Commissioners did want to proceed with the amendments. Those are all found in the record. Now on to the Board of County Commissioners process and a summary of the testimony. Deliberations after that initial public hearing began on June 10th, at which time the board requested staff to return with additional research, a little bit more about other counties, a little bit more about funding and fire issues. At the subsequent meeting on August 14th, the board signed order number 2024-029 that reopened the record for about 3 months. I think it was just under 3 months, to November 1st. The goal for that was to get more information, primarily from the fire districts. As you might recall, we were in the height of fire season at that time, so they're kind of busy, as well as just find other information from other counties as well as the public. So that record closed on November 1st, and here we are. The prior testimony in the first round, about 60 written comments were received and 6 people testified at the board hearing. In general, it was roughly half and half split in favor and opposed. We don't go to an exact count because there is some overlap with people testifying in multiple ways or multiple times. Generally, arguments in favor were that it provides a much needed housing option for people in the county. It's an alternative type of housing to a traditional single-family stick-built dwelling. It provides financial opportunities for property owners. You know, being a landlord and getting some rent can be really beneficial for people. And it could potentially provide a legal path for those who are currently living illegally in RVs. And we are very aware that that's happening in the county and has been. Arguments in opposition, A lot of concerns about enforcement, enforcement of everything, but also illegal RV dwellings was already strained in terms of just staff capacity. Potential adverse effects on property values and rural character, concerns about wildfire, landlord-tenant legal issues, wildlife, and traffic. In terms of agency testimony, we had a few pieces of testimony from our own community development department. Excuse me, our code enforcement division. They had some concerns for their capacity, as I just alluded to, for their capacity to enforce any additional claims or issues. The difficulty of enforcement, legal issues, some of those tied to landlord-tenant things, access to the RVs. So part of these amendments, you have to prove certain things about the RV that, for instance, there's a working sink and toilet. So gaining access to that RV, making sure everything is, all the permits have been pulled properly for electric, for septic, et cetera. They also noted that less than half of the current illegal RVs that are within their system as complaints have the potential to be eligible for the proposed program. This means that they would meet the baseline criteria. So in other words, they're in the right zone, they have the proposed minimum acreage, so a little bit less than half. So it doesn't, and that's not accounting for other violations. They might have kind of ancillary violations relating to other things going on, other septic issues, solid waste, that type of thing. So about a little bit less than half could maybe come into the.
So how many are we
legal light.
talking about then, Tanya?
I'd have to look back at that memo. Excuse me one second.
I mean, reading this, it still hasn't gone very far. I mean, only Clackamas County, according to your
That's
notes.
correct. So at the time of that memo, which was this summer, they had the RV occupancy violation cases were about 78.
Okay,
I
so maybe
haven't
40
updated that.
would be okay.
Pardon?
So maybe 40 would be okay then.
Perhaps, yeah, depending on those conditions, and not accounting for other violations. The on-site wastewater division noted that there is still a large potential for septic denial on smaller lots. This is due to a combination of the type of soils in the area plus DEQ rules. And they reiterated that the RVs should have features of permanent dwellings rather than temporary dwellings, which we do try to address in the code. These are meant for people to have their homes in. It's not meant for a temporary, week vacation. It's meant for people to live in and live productive lives. I'm going on to the new testimony now that was received. So this was in that 3-month period. Staff received 13 pieces of written testimony. 5 of those were people who had not yet testified. The rest were repeats, reiterating largely the same concerns, sometimes going into additional detail. 6 were in support of the amendments, 3 of which were new testimony, new people, essentially. The main gist was that provided much needed housing options for people in this environment where there's a ton of housing pressure, as we know. 7 were in opposition. 2 of those were new testimony, or new people, excuse me. Concerns for health and safety, septic issues, code enforcement, and general compatibility. In essence, the issues that were raised in the new testimony largely echoed that of the first round, and was split more or less the same. And we appreciate people making those comments, so thanks. Fire districts. So this was a big one. This is what we were really looking to get input on. Staff presented to the Central Oregon Fire Chiefs Association, COFCA. I like saying COFCA, on August 14th, and we requested additional input. We kind of put those issues out there for them. There had been concerns about their capacity to deal with these potential amendments in terms of inspections, enforcement, and their ability to respond to calls. Their testimony noted that the program could work if the RVs were subject to the same permit requirements as ADUs. And I will talk about this in a moment. I'm kind of going over all of the testimony and then I'll have a staff response to that. They also voiced concerns about workload, as we've noted already, enforcement, and addressing. Building official. So Randy Scheid, our building official in CDD, he provided testimony stating that, quote, he does not support the use of these temporary living units for permanent dwelling accommodations. and that's available in the record. He went on to move forward with that comparison between ADUs and RVs, because that comparison has been drawn quite a bit. Largely, RVs, unlike ADUs, are not subject to the wildfire mitigation section of the building code, which is otherwise known as ORSC, the Oregon Residential Specialty Code. RVs would not be subject to that because they're not considered structures. They're not subject to the energy efficiency requirements of that code or the general safety, sanitary, and durability standards of the code. And lastly, the RVs, this program would not create a funding mechanism. In other words, they're not real property to generate funding for the needed services, such as the fire, such as the emergency. So this testimony kind of overlaps with other testimony we received, and I'll look to address that in a moment altogether. So staff response to this, just a little kind of wrapping up of staff's thoughts relating to the fire district and the building official testimony. As I just noted, the RVs are not regulated by the building code that addresses things like wildfire protection, energy efficiency, and general health and safety. They don't receive an inspection from the building safety division. That's just not part of the path because they're not subject to that code. The access standards that some have voiced concerned about, these could potentially be addressed by in the code by establishing driveway surface and width requirements. We have something very similar to that in the ADU code. We could potentially develop language that's largely similar to that. The difference was that that was required in the state law that enabled ADUs, whereas none of that has been addressed in the RV state law, but we could potentially do something locally to address that. Similarly, with defensible space, the ADUs, the state legislation addressed that a lot, and the RVs did not. Those are tied to building permits, which I just noted is not a path for RVs. However, we could possibly, similar to access standards, utilize some of those requirements that are used in the ADU code, take some of that language in terms of defensible space requirements. But we'd need to develop a mechanism for who's looking at that, who's enforcing it, who's inspecting it, who's signing off on it. These are things that would be dealt with not in the code language per se, but probably in the implementation aspect of the program.
Tanya, can I just ask a question about that? I mean, my impression is that Senate Bill 762 has established a WUI area, and it will soon have established a wildfire hazard map area. And if you're in the WUI and you're in the wildfire hazard, high hazard area, you will be required to do defensible space, whether you're seeking a new permit for something or not. So I'm not really seeing why we're not just covered by that, right? You know, if you're in one of those areas, you're going to be required to do defensible space no matter what. So what does it matter if you don't have the kind of additional push from the ADU requirements?
Yeah, that's really.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I might look to Will here to support me, but I believe not everything would be covered in that geographic area. They might not all fall into the WUI and the maps as well. The maps, I know they were supposed to come apparently last month and then this month, but we're not quite sure when those will be in place. So I think there's a little bit of void before that gets implemented, before those get set. I don't know if Will, if you have
because once the maps are adopted, the ADU requirements default to
correct.
Just if you're in the WUI and you're in the high hazard area. So are we just talking about like this window of time until the maps are adopted, or is this a long-term concern?
Good morning, Commissioners. Chair Will Groves, your planning manager. So the wildfire hazard maps and defensible space standards and construction standards are associated with dwellings and structures and would not apply to RVs. So to the extent that the RV was located next to the house, for example, you know, it might well fall within the defensible space provisions that were provided for that house should that be required of the property. But, you know, on somebody with a larger property, they might well want to put this RV space some distance from the house. you know, there's reasons to think that that might not be the preferred solution, given that you probably want to co-locate it with existing septic facilities rather than try to create new ones. But these don't set off under the rules under 762. These RVs don't set off their own defensible space radius. So to the extent that we wanted to address the fire department and building official concerns associated with both, you know, these RVs propensity to burst into flames and to be ignited by surrounding fires, they would likely need their own defensible provisions that we would have to implement locally. And that comes with some cost, and it's cumbersome. You know, we don't have forestry experts. And so developing standards specific to the RVs to do defensible space isn't impossible, but increase the cost of the program and the obligations of someone trying to get a permit if we wanted to address those fire concerns at least in part.
And as envisioned right now, what are the provisions in our proposed, RVs as rental dwelling rules around how close or how far an RV needs to be from a dwelling?
Right now, the draft language is it simply cannot be closer than 10 feet to anything for
Okay.
ignition reasons. We haven't
But
landed.
how far away though?
There's not
Clackamas
a
is
there's not a
10,
max.
but then they say not more than 100 feet. But then if you're trying to use the same septic system, yeah, you can't get too far away, can you?
Right. I mean, and that is something that could occur in deliberations. Right now, that 10-foot kind of buffer is all that we have, along with the existing setbacks of the underlying zone. As Chair Adair noted in Clackamas, I believe it was more than 10 feet, but not less than 100 feet, similar to ADUs. So that's something that could be addressed. There could be an envelope drawn, but it's currently not in the draft version of the code.
Okay. I mean, that seems advantageous to me, not just from a septic perspective, but also from a fire response perspective. I mean, if people are going to have tried to make their driveway to their primary dwelling as accessible as possible for, a fire truck. And, if you put some little 2-track road off into the middle of nowhere in your property, that's, that is much less optimal for fire response than just basically having a little spur off of your main driveway. And having it close to the home. So, that Clackamas County provision, capping it at 100 feet away, I think is I'll just signal now that I think that's a good idea, and then that I think to a significant degree addresses this defensible space requirement concern, because you would get the benefit of the defensible space required around the primary dwelling.
It would also be important, it's unclear how the 762 rollout would occur. So, right now, at least as I understand it, there's not clear lines of, it's not like a forester is going to visit every property in Oregon and, and apply these, and that these defensible space standards will apply to certain properties with high hazard and WUI. So, something that if the board does decide to proceed with this would be a question about, would we want to independently kick off, some sort of defensible space, in all circumstances or in specified circumstances as a condition of the permit, rather than, waiting for the state rollout of the defensible space to occur in association with the structure. Because as I was explaining earlier, the RV wouldn't trigger any sort of defensible space action on any required defensible space action on the property. And so they would still be waiting for whatever the state action was to roll out. And my understanding is that there aren't, robust funds and programs to do in association with that, and lots of discussion of education opportunities rather than quick compliance.
I'll move on. Yes.
Okay, I was just checking to see if Commissioner DeBonne had any comments.
No comments.
I don't have that many more slides.
Okay.
Okay, so fees and funding, this was another big issue. As we've discussed several times, RVs are not considered real property, and as such, they don't generate a bump in property taxes the way building an ADU or an addition or that type of thing would. And that's what funds emergency and other services. There might be a marginal bump for the improvements necessary to create the pedestal for the RV, which is kind of the one person RV pad with the electric and the septic connections, but it's not anything significant that would really generate any funding if it even triggers any increase. Staff has been unable to identify a funding mechanism that's available to the Community Development Department to establish a separate additional fee that would be dedicated to emergency and other services. A couple of ideas have been floated around. Business licenses. Currently, a business license program doesn't exist in the county. So that would require establishing a program, starting it up, purchasing whatever necessary software module and training, et cetera, just to kind of get the program off the ground. It would likely be costly in order to fund the program itself, all of that kind of administrative side of it, as well as ensuring adequate funding for those emergency services. Separate fees for fire districts would have to be, if that was a desire, that has to come, it can't come from CDD. It has to come from a governing body of those fire districts. That's ideally speaks for all of the fire districts. In theory, if each one had a governing body, they could do their own process, but essentially they would have to figure out, hey, we want to have these fees. This is how much it should be. These are all the rules, and go through a public process on their end to establish what these fees might be. That's kind of beyond the purview of CDD. We can't just pick a number and kind of add it to our permits. If that's established, CDD does have the mechanism to collect those fees and to pass them through, essentially be the cash register of the transaction. But that in turn also does take a little bit of effort and time, so that would have to be funded in turn. So that's where we've landed with the fees and the funding issues. Yes. Other counties, as discussed.
No, Tanya, actually going back to all this and thinking about this with a little common sense. Okay, when you do an ADU in Deschutes County now, I've been told that you actually have to put in a septic system for that up to 900 square foot ADU. Okay, so how could we say then that this RV is going to be able to hook into the system that already exists when the ADU has to establish its own system?
Well, RVs, they would be subject to the process that anything that an ADU or an addition would. They still have to get an evaluation. They have to see if their existing septic if the capacity is adequate. So they still have to go through that process. It has to be blessed by our wastewater division. And then it might have to be expanded. It might have to be, you might have to have a separate system. So it
we're
might
trying to
be
do something that's going to be a lot more, let's say, financially, supportive for people that are really limited with the funding. But, if you have to add an ADU, another septic system, that's like $45,000. Yeah, that totally negates making this a cheap.
However, I will note that Todd Cleveland, our onsite wastewater manager, noted that with RVs, it's more likely that there will be existing capacity in many situations, not in all. Of course, you need to check because of the nature of the flows. And I'm not a septic expert, but in general, it's less flow because it's an RV. It's smaller. It's the plumbing. It's different. So it's less strain on the system. It might be more concentrated because of the chemicals used, but it is more likely that the systems that are in place already might be able to handle it. So it doesn't automatically mean you're going to have to expand or.
I know, I noticed that.
So
Todd's comment was
a little bit lower potential investment, but you just don't know until you check.
You never know.
The requirements for the RVs, it doesn't say that the RV has to have a shower and
have a toilet and a sink.
Just a toilet and a sink. Okay. So I mean, showers, that's a lot of volume of water, and washing machines, dishwashers, washer dryers. And that's stuff you find in an ADU and you don't necessarily find in an RV.
But to that point, and maybe I'm getting in front of Peter here. So the first thing to note is that, in each case, adding an
Peter,
ADU.
did you want to say something? Are you sure?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, just noting that, at such time as you look to add a property, add something that's going to put septic to the property, you come through our environmental soils division. Todd looks at DEQ rules, and there's it may be with your if you have an existing house and you're adding an ADU, your system may have capacity for that. If you built an oversized system, it'd be relatively rare.
That's not what I'm hearing in the real world.
Yes.
Somebody built a brand new house, built it smaller than what they originally had it permitted for, and they wanted to add an ADU, and they were told they had to add a new septic system. So that's the real world, folks. It's not, and they were shocked because that was a lot more money. But they were really hoping they could add that ADU, and it was going to be cost prohibitive. It adds like $45 a square foot to the building cost, I believe.
Certainly, that may well be the case for RVs, is that they may be the straw that breaks the camel's back on the existing system. And it's important to remember that, although RVs generate a lesser flow, presumably, the people living them and are bathing in some way are doing laundry in some way, and they're probably, in most circumstances have an arrangement with the owner rather than, that they're going to Planet Fitness to take their showers, for example. So, that water is still being directed likely to the site, except the model for the RV doesn't capture that. So, there's some risk to the system, in terms of cumulative loading to it that, somebody who might, in practice, people use water. The RV life may diminish that somewhat, but, in the end, I think people are probably still bathing and doing laundry even when living in those circumstances.
I remember my RV had a bathtub because I wanted a bathtub. So yeah. I don't think it would pass the inspection, right?
Might not get a title, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it didn't have a dishwasher, but it did have a bathtub. So I know, what is it? How many gallons do baths take? A lot.
Did it have a shower too, or just a bathroom?
No, it had both, but it definitely had a bathtub because I thought that was important.
So moving on to actions in other counties. As I noted earlier, RV legislation has been adopted in Clackamas County. That's the only one so far who's ahead of us. Those amendments became effective on September 3rd. Last time I spoke with them, they've received 2 applications. One is incomplete and one was sort of pending. So they had basically no information about it that we could relay. Lane County is in progress. I believe their first planning commission hearing is, it's either this week or next week.
Next week.
It's next week.
The 19th.
So I put the draft code in the case of Lane County and the adopted code in the case of Clackamas into the record. There's a lot of similarities. I'd like that we all sort of work together, and a lot of the things that we, as well as other counties, decided to add that's beyond the state law are pretty consistent. So a lot of them, both of them, excuse me, are requiring a toilet and a sink in the RV. Lane County in their draft is requiring a parking pad of, gravel or similar material, as well as a setback at least 10 feet from other structures. The big difference is that neither of those counties are addressing the things that are big issues here thus far, as the fire hardening, the wildfire, the defensible space, and the emergency access requirements. Obviously, these issues are of varying importance depending on where you are in the state. So it's understandable that this has not risen to that level for those 2 counties. But in terms of looking for comparable rules, we have not found that relating to wildfire and defensible space in those counties. We are keeping apprised with other counties. I think I noted in the memo some other counties who were holding back a little bit on proceeding. So these are the 2 kind of out in the front right now.
What about out of Oregon, though? What about Washington State or California, Northern California, where they have a lot of fires?
We
I
haven't
mean,
looked into those because
I was just
the rules would be
wondering.
different. I don't know, to be honest.
I mean, what
they've
they've done. I mean, if in case they have done something.
And I think the laws concerning wildfire in Oregon in general, or, taking RVs out of the equation are also quite different. But
I mean, but the Ellensburg area, that's one of the highest fire areas of Washington State. They do have a college there. I wonder if they, it's not exactly right in the trees, but.
I mean, I really appreciate the concern about fire. And I do think that putting that 100-foot cap on distance from the primary dwelling does a lot to address defensible space and emergency access requirements. On the third piece, fire hardening, RVs are not built to be fire hardened. They're just not. And in the ideal world, everyone in our community would live in a fire hardened, optimal structure. And in reality, there is an incredible shortage of affordable housing for people to live in. And there are hundreds and hundreds of people living in RVs in our community. So I sympathize with the desire to have fire hardened, homes for everybody. And I think it's way better if someone's living in an RV anyway, for them to be doing it compliant with code within 100 feet of a house, and close into the driveway to that primary dwelling, and benefiting from the defensible space around that home. So I really appreciate Randy Scheid's concerns, and I just we got to see the forest for the trees here. If there's hundreds and hundreds of people already living in RVs, let's have them do it as safely as possible, because clearly we're not, our code compliance is not keeping up. And there are places where our code compliance doesn't even, we don't even have jurisdiction, inside incorporated cities on federal public lands. So, we can achieve a lot for fire safety by finding a way to allow RV rental dwellings in the places that they will be allowed on county property, within county jurisdiction.
That brings us, that's a perfect segue, thank you, to the conclusion and the next steps. So staff requests general direction from the board before proceeding, given the testimony that we've summarized today. Just to recap, the fire district testimony requested the requirements of ADUs, but some of these, not all, but some are not necessarily possible. For instance, the funding and some elements of the fire safety. Again, the building officials' concerns don't have a solution that have been identified in the record for the differences between RVs and ADUs with respect to safety, energy efficiency, etc. So given that, staff has several options for the board. The first is to proceed with deliberations, like the sort of standard process. Staff can return with a matrix addressing these issues. So for instance, the setbacks or the distance between the RV and the dwelling, options for those types of things, including defensible space language, all of that, and the issues that have been discussed thus far in the public testimony. The board can pause the process, the legislative process, and resume at a future date, say a year or some time that's determined. This allows for potential action by those outside of CD about funding. So for instance, if the fire districts wanted to kind of take it upon themselves to investigate or initiate a process to establish funding, this would be the way to do that. This would give them some time to do that. Again, also, we could wait and assess the experiences of other counties. How valuable that is the board's opinion. Or the third option is to withdraw the proposed amendments. That's a little bit more final, but it also does give the board the option to reinitiate at any time. The door is never completely closed. It's just a little more closed with the withdrawal option. But anything's always possible. So those are the options that staff is providing. I'm happy to answer any questions or engage in discussion. Thank you.
It is interesting because a week ago, someone had texted me, and someone in their neighborhood, it started out with one RV, and now they have a lot more than one. And, at first they were, okay, fine, but then it got excessive. So, we know there's a need there. Are RVs required? Do they have smoke detectors in them? I mean, I know they're not that big, but do they have to have smoke detectors? I know they're flammable. They have totally different, building standards.
Right. In order to get a title as an RV, there are some standards that are have to do with kind of the materials that are used and flammability and things like that to make sure that it's met the ANSI, I believe, standards. I can't tell you 100% about smoke detector. My assumption would be yes, but
It's pretty easy to
don't
buy one and stick a battery in it
yes.
and say, put it up inside your RV.
And then carbon monoxide detectors, is that required?
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it?
Fire
The
extinguisher.
one very basic RV I'm aware of has a carbon monoxide detector in it.
Okay,
I don't
mean,
know
it's-
how prevalent it is.
well, it's always challenging how to, do something. You're trying to help people out that are really struggling. And, but yet you want them to be as safe as possible with the fact that, okay, it's not going to be quite as warm probably as an ADU. Is the installation, is it as, as effective as in an ADU in Deschutes County? So.
If I could circle back to the question of fees and funding for a moment, we did have a pretty in-depth discussion not that long ago about a business license for short-term rentals, and we may or may not have the right staff in the room to discuss this, but I would be curious whether we're talking about the same kind of software and setting up the same kind of a system for, a business license program. In which case, one possible way to look at this, to think about this would be to bring back both of those business license, bring back that business license and this business license concept as a bundle, share costs for setting up a business license program across the two functions. And have a way to generate revenue for code compliance. And in this specific case for our fire services to receive the additional funding that they feel they need to adequately protect against this new use. I'll just also say what I really like about that idea is, particularly in this case, we have so many code compliance complaints against illegal RV dwellings. And I mean, if we could generate some revenue to be able to beef up our code compliance capacity in that specific area, then we really could imagine being able to tell people, RVs as rental dwellings are a real opportunity in our community. You have to do it the right way. And if you don't do it the right way, we will find you and we will shut you down. Because this could be a tremendous opportunity to provide housing options for, I'm guessing hundreds and hundreds of people in our community. So I just wanted to float that idea.
So I think we're at a spot where do we want to proceed with deliberations or not? And I support this also. A lot of ideas, deliberations process will get us down to a focused path. Remember, we already do have the proposed code that was presented to us a while ago. So, tweaking all the parts of that is the next step. But I'm supportive of proceeding also. Some of my thoughts are maybe we start off with 2 or 5 acres aligning with ADUs instead of going to 1, because that's one part that kind of gives me some angst. You heard about Oregon Water Wonderland Unit 2, not designed for it. It's on a sewer system. I've heard from people up and down some of the crossroads off a day road saying, what are you going to do in my neighborhood? I didn't move here for that. So 1 acres is kind of a trigger for some people. So it's just a discussion that we could have. Also, I support fire district fee process if we proceed, it might get fire districts to say, oh, it's going, we need to do something. And even if we come up with a final package, I would support waiting until, if they start a process, and I'm thinking Lapine Fire specifically in southern Deschutes County, if they start a process, I'd be supportive of giving them room and space and time to work through that process instead of, forcing that on there. Also, remember, we are talking about a transportation system development charge. I think it's half of a accessory or a primary SDC that we already do. So I do support that also. So as I say, this is kind of practicing. Let's see if we can get this to happen. Let's see if people use it. I'm surprised that Clackamas hasn't utilized it more, but I don't know what that means. Maybe it's just seasonal timing. So as I say, one of the most specific items, maybe starting with 2 or 5 acres, just to practice doing this. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
You mean limiting it to 5 acres?
Well,
And
yeah, so
bigger
remember
than what?
accessory dwelling units, is it 5 acres, right? And I was supportive of less, but going back to maybe that's the starting point for this, because we could always make it more available for more properties, but maybe that's a starting point. So as I say, there's folks on the 1 acre, because there's just vast tracts of 1 acre properties, like 12,000 of them or something like that. So we need to think about that. What does that really mean? That will change the character of some of these areas aggressively.
If they all did it, I mean, how many
Yeah,
of
and that they all-
them are going to do it? So
Yeah, I'm just saying that's one of the decision spaces that I struggle with a little bit.
Well, you see quite a few of them.
Yeah.
If you drive around, as much as I do.
But I support proceeding with deliberations, trying to land this thing. And
Okay,
some-
so is that a motion then?
Well, I don't know that we need to do that today, but
do we need a motion to decide to proceed to deliberations?
Well, it says, given the factors recommended motions.
No, I understand. It's in the staff report, but I think as long as you provide staff with sufficient direction, I think they can come back and schedule deliberations at a future point.
Okay, so we don't need a motion.
I'm supportive of proceeding with deliberations. I think that there's something here, and hopefully we can run it down and run it to the ground and do it, do it the best possible way for our community.
And one more item for me, I was really supporting and promoting the idea of a required ramada or roof structure. So at this point, I've concluded that I don't see that as a hard requirement. It may be a good to do, it may help your RV last longer, but it was pointed out that, we don't see RVs collapse from snow, and that's true. I mean, there's some RVs that are collapsed in the woods, but it wasn't from snow, it was from abuse and dismantling.
Well, don't forget 10 years ago today, we had 24 inches of snow at my house because it's my sister's birthday. And I thought, wow, I will always remember that day. There was so much snow. So anyway, yeah, it was a shocking day.
So as I say, no requirement for ramada is where I'm at on that right this time.
Okay, we got that. Yeah, more than 1 acre does seem to be appropriate here in Deschutes County.
And as I said, just as a starting point, I mean, maybe there's a way to, maybe that's and then there's conditional use process or a path or something. So I'm just sensitive to the, areas that have many, many 1 acre lots next to each other. With
Okay, and so
unpaved road-
if they have
unpaved-
more than one at their property?
Oh, I
Only
know.
one?
Yeah, that happens. I know.
One thing. You get
One. Okay, so the people that have added into the original, that's not going to be illegal.
not have an ADU and an RV as well. It's
Right. Okay, one or the other. Okay, good.
No, it's really important. If we do this, it's really important in the rollout that people can distinguish what is an authorized, permitted RV rental dwelling and what is not. It probably makes sense to do this in a more limited fashion at the rollout, so that people can get used to that idea of, these people are doing it by the book and these people are not. So that might line up well with the idea of starting with a 2 or 5 acre minimum lot size, before we think about going to 1.
Yeah, it essentially, limits the eligibility a little bit. It makes it more like a pilot project, a test case. So I think that,
We love pilot projects, don't we?
So staff can return, I don't know if we want to talk dates now, but just a couple of, we'll look at lot sizes, we'll look at setbacks and distances between things. Those are the two things that rose to the surface today. We'll also look back at the public testimony and obviously elevate other things into the matrix as we see necessary. Does the board want to select a date now, or should we work on it and what's the best way to proceed?
I don't know.
If I can jump in, if we could
Yes, Will.
request a date uncertain. We've got, of course, the board's got some scheduling constraints coming up, and we're got to write some new code and coordinate that with a number of internal departments. So we would appreciate a date uncertain, and we'd bring it back as quickly as feasibly possible, given the long process and the board interest in potentially delivering this project.
Okay, so you said a date uncertain to bring it back, and the fact that Eugene or Lane County is doing something next week. It would, interesting to see what they're going to do.
Yeah, that's their planning commission hearing, so they still have to go through they're at the very beginning, but yeah, absolutely, any input is.
But they've
they've
had issues, so it'll be interesting to see.
And just one note that and I might be getting ahead of myself, but if this is adopted in whatever shape it ends up in, we anticipate following the model of ADUs, and that there was a slight pause to figure out all of the details of implementation, getting all of our ducks in the row in terms of getting the applications ready, getting FAQs out, just getting that information out to the public and making sure we are ready, in all of our divisions within CDD to be able to establish a seamless process. So we think that worked pretty well, the ADU process, that rollout. So we anticipate something, if this occurs, to follow in those footsteps.
So how many ADUs have been built then in Deschutes County? Does anyone have that number?
Not know that. Do you know how many?
I think the total interest level here is kind of in the 2 to 3 dozen level. How many are actually, the actual number of the construction complete are much lower than that, but that's, pre-apps, people who are going through investigations.
So you're saying 24 to 36?
Yeah, of total properties that appear to be intending to proceed toward that path. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me for completed structures in process, land use approvals today. We can get back to you with that information.
Well, I mean, of course, once we approved it, the building costs went crazy. So yeah, it all went together, didn't it? And then if you have to have your own septic system, that, it's another 45,000. So it gets very expensive.
Yes.
I mean, if you were building like another 2,000 square foot unit, that would be definitely not quite so expensive. But when you can only build up to 900 square feet, it really, and you're so limited. Anyway, well, good. Okay, Tanya, thank you so much.
This was very helpful for giving us direction. So,
all right, thanks.
See you in the future.
Thank you, commissioners.
Yes, and don't forget, 24 inches, it could still fall today. No, the wind's blowing. Other
Vietnam
items? Have any
Bachelor.
other items? I did have, I was on a meeting with M Perfectly last Friday morning, and they're working on their plans for next year. That's the program that works with women who've either had substance use disorder, homeless issues, etc. And Ashley Smith is running that program. It's going to be, she's done it for 3 years now, and she's actually had 20 women that have graduated from the program. She's still, I think, working with almost 30 women in different programs, and it's incredible. It's been really successful. So thank you, Ashley, for all that you do to make a difference in our community.
I've got 2 items. Newberry Regional Partnership, remember, is the vision and action plan effort. They're having a big kind of the roundtable action summit tomorrow at the Shark and Sun River. So there's a bunch of invited community members, and they're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different topics. So that's kind of a big effort that's coming together tomorrow. this will be the content for a published report for an action plan. And also at Lapine High School last night, there was a career and technical education visioning event. So they've got their wood shop and their metal shop and their forestry program and efforts for health occupations and culinary services. And they're just ready for the next phase of some investment in their facilities and the program. So they're really spinning it up for the community, welcoming people in to see if anybody's available to help financially, but just also promoting the fact that CTE is on the upswing. So it's a pretty exciting point in time at Lapine High School.
No, that's really outstanding. I so admire the programming in Salem that, what they can offer those students, it's unbelievable. And I know that Redmond has done a lot of really good things with it too.
Well, and the kids, the students that are involved with any of these programs, high graduation rate, career opportunities, going into the trades, just all kinds of opportunities opening up. So it just kind of feels like this is the motion is towards these hands-on skill development. As I say, it's not just construction, it's health occupations and also hospitality. So a lot of excitement in that area right now.
Great.
Great that
Okay.
our school districts are engaging all those partners and doing that work. I'll just share that last Wednesday morning after Election Day, very early in the morning, I visited with the Sun River Rotary and gave them a little presentation on things that the county is working on. And they were very interested and very interested in a lot of things, and in particular fire concern, fire mitigation concerns and groundwater quality in South County.
Nick, did you have anything you wanted to add today? Okay. All right. Do we have an executive today? Okay, we do not have executive. Okay, then therefore our next meeting will be Monday afternoon at 1 p.m. And we will not have a meeting next Wednesday because we will be in Eugene for the Association of Oregon County Commissioners, our annual convention. So we will see you next Monday afternoon at 1 p.m. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stephen.